Auzubillahiminash-shaytanir-rajim. Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. Our dear students, our today's discussion is about concluding remarks and about future of the United Nations, and I also explain you about performance of the United Nations, contributions of the United Nations, and also critical aspects of the United Nations. Overall, an assessment of the United Nations functions. And this topic is also last topic of the syllabus. While discussing about concluding remarks, discussing about different contributions and different aspects of United Nations, and during the last 75 years of the United Nations era, the world has experienced rapid and revolutionary changes in technological, economic, geopolitical sphere and in telecommunication, and there are so many other revolutionary changes during this period. Particularly, one point is very important, and that is about the basic purposes of the United Nations. United Nations was created in 1945 after Second World War for promotion international peace and security and social and economic welfare of states. United Nations role for attaining its basic objective is remained very complicated because different changes and different interest of superpowers and role of superpowers in the United Nations created different contributory and critical aspects of this institution. The United Nations, with its 193 members, has achieved a universality of membership, and despite all political stresses, problems, it has adapted itself to the challenges, problems, and possibilities of the last half of the 20th century and almost post-Cold War era and a whole period of 20th century indicated its different activities all over the world. It provides an area for interplay of international politics, diplomacy, multilateral diplomacy, and it played a very important role as a forum for communication, political mobilization, and interest articulations. The United Nations peacekeeping operation in different crisis situations have generated a greater confidence in positive potentialities of the organization, enhancing its structure. When a local issue becomes globalized, the world organization can minimize the possibility of outside interference and direct superpower confrontation through interposition of neutral peacekeeping forces. United Nations also playing its very important role as a town meeting of the world. Particularly, annual session of the General Assembly reflects changing attitudes, aspirations, and grievances of states. The Assembly is primarily preoccupied with the new geopolitical map of the world of the problem, particularly during the process of decolonization and development and relationship between the developed and developing region of the world. It has initiated impressive program of actions on many urgent problems facing the world. The General Assembly established the United Nations Fund for Drug Abuse Control in 1970 and has convened a series of conferences of laws of the sea. It has adopted a world plan of action for population control and invoked the World Food Conference in 1974. The Security Council provides a forum for undertaking binding decisions and quick actions on crucial issues of international peace and security. On many occasions, the Security Council has undertaken serious and persistent efforts to conciliate differences between contending parties and has played a valuable role in preventing the wider of conflict. During this discussion, one point is very important, that when problems are by their very nature not susceptible of immediate solution, a process of adjustment and containment of actual conflict is surely the next best alternative. So, the United Nations also acts as a safety valve. The United Nations Charter elaborate and specify different patterns for the peaceful settlement of disputes, for example, through mediation, through conciliation, through judicial procedures, and through international law, and through different agreements and treaties of states, and through regional organization, and to secure peaceful resolution of interstate disputes. So, the World Organization provides means through which interstate disputes can be resolved and conflicting interest of the disputed parties removed. Overall, United Nations secured different critical situation in different ways. United Nations major contributions are different. United Nations played its very important role during Korean War during Iraq and Kuwait war and limited the conflict in Cyprus, Indonesia, and other countries of the world. United Nations is considered as an instrument of multilateral diplomacy, played an extensive role in disputes relating to different regions of the world. United Nations role could be described as minimal in the crises of different parts of the world. So, through different methods of peaceful settlement, through collective security system, through peacekeeping and peacemaking activities, United Nations played an outstanding role in the maintenance of peace and security. It has made significant contribution towards the reduction of armaments and different agreements and treaties concluded through the United Nations. The role of Secretary General of the United Nations is also very important during this discussion. The Secretary General of the United Nations played most important role in supervising the United Nations peacekeeping missions in different parts of the world, and Secretary General role as a mediator and through diplomacy to minimize and to reconcile differences among disputed parties. Charter of the United Nations also explains about the specialized agencies. The United Nations and its specialized agencies have undertaken enlarged and diversified functional programs to promote multilateral cooperation for social and economic developments of the poverty reduction of the world, and for this purpose the Economic and Social Council of the United Nations, the specialized agencies, and other United Nations bodies are concerned with a large number of complicated economic, social problems and covering the economic planning, technical assistance to the developing countries, application of science and technology to the development, industrialization, study of the population problems, environmental pollutions, study about urban development, social welfare, better health and educational facilities, protection for refugees, drug control, promotion of human rights and fundamental freedoms, and emergency assistance during national disaster. Overall, the organization has been utilized as a forum for mobilization of world public opinion on the issues of global concern such as the environmental pollution, population, resource conservation. The United Nations has sponsored international conferences on environment, population, industrialization, food, status of women, laws of sea, trade, development, and human settlements. Such different conferences have played very constructive role in the formulating guidelines and principles for future national and international activities for the betterment of mankind. The United Nations has rendered valuable contribution towards international movement for protection and promotion of human rights. The United Nations system has launched impressive rostrum of functional and developmental programs in underdeveloped regions to create atmosphere favorable for betterment of various socio-economic and cultural rights. Thus, the United Nations has taken constructive lead in issues involving the developing members of the nation. But until substantial progress towards more equitable distribution of global economic resources towards different parts of the world, problems, all problems related to socio-economic fields cannot be resolved unless superpowers played their effective role, because United Nations also indicated gaps between the ideals and performance. The needs of world political order and economic and political capabilities of the United Nations have generated widespread about positive potentials and future role of the organization. The United Nations record in the area of international security falls far short of expectation, and the member states of the United Nations role and their basic obligations and their denial about fulfill the basic obligation also become a shortcoming of this institution. While discussing about different contributions and different important aspects of the United Nations, I want to explain you a very important point, that United Nations not only playing its role for the fulfilling its political objectives or in the field of politics, but this international organization also playing its very effective and very important role for social economic welfare and promotion of social and economic development, particularly for developing countries. And in this regard, United Nations 15 specialized agencies are working all over the world to fulfill their basic objectives. Now I explain you briefly about the failure or about the critical aspects of the United Nations. One point is very, very important, and I want to quote here United Nations former Secretary General Mr. Othant. In his words, the failure of the United Nations is the failure of the human community. The United Nations will be as strong or as weak as its member states wish it to be. He clearly explained that the organizational deficiencies were not the sole cause of unsatisfactory performance of the United Nations. And most important point is that efficiency and authority of the organization depend on the role of the member states of the United Nations. In this regard, the role of major powers cannot be denied. The major powers of the world are reluctant to entrust the United Nations with greater authority as they prefer a more decentralized management for vital affairs of international politics. The organization lacks political capabilities to deal with disputes involving direct confrontation among superpower. So the United Nations has failed to play a most active and efficient role in crucial issues such as Middle East issues and South Asian Kashmir issues, strategic nuclear arms control, and mutual reduction of armaments, and North South dialogues. So, political considerations and ideological levels, different influences upon nation states can be very easily traced about the commitment to the Charter of the United Nations. So, in a very simple way, I want to explain here that basic aspirations of the Charter of the United Nations not fulfilling through the violation of superpowers due to their own vested interest. If we examine past history of the United Nations, then we find out that international diplomatic history, alliances, balance of power, sphere of influences, strategies, and counter strategies have made their reappearance against in the quest of national security. The United Nations peacekeeping activities, United Nations collective security system, United Nations other major contributions sometime remained ineffective due to the veto power of 5 permanent members of the Security Council. So, the superpowers of the world have assigned priority through the veto power in the Security Council and United Nations cooperation among all nations of the world remained a dream. It is a matter of grave concern that different efforts of the United Nations for international community have failed due to different discriminations and discrimination of decisions and their applications. The critics of the United Nations explained that different level of protection of different type of national interest of the states always remained a major hurdle and major cause of conflict and clashes among states. United Nations role regarding different issues regarding maintenance of peace and security, regarding the elimination of conflicts, and also to resolve different disputes among states, remained a most important and basic aspect of the United Nations, but practically this institution failed to achieve its real basic objectives. United Nations performance can be traced through the many representatives of different states for the demand of revision of the charter. Many states voiced for the need for a thorough revision of the charter, and superpowers not agree to make any amendment in the charter to share their powers by further member states. So, 5 permanent members, veto power, also one of the major causes of the ineffectiveness of the United Nations. There are so many recommendations for improving the future performance of the United Nations, and for this purpose different proposals, different recommendations, role of different international bodies remained very effective. And in this regard, number of major steps must be taken for the better and effective role of the United Nations. The General Assembly should develop more efficient and rationalized working procedure and adopt realistic approach towards the pressing the problems of member states. Role of major institutions of the United Nations, for example, General Assembly, Security Council, Economic and Social Council, all these major bodies of the United Nations must play their important role, because it is very necessary to promote cooperation among nations for the betterment of mankind. Along with different shortcomings, as I explained you, for betterment of this organization is to minimize the role of superpowers, to enhance the international diplomacy in a better way, and efficient role of international agencies to develop for better international management of common problems in the realms of trade, commodity pricing and stocks, fair sharing, and all monetary management. Overall, United Nations should make a greater consensus about the different amendments in the charter. United Nations as a second international organization is still playing its important role despite of all its shortcomings, despite of all its critical aspects and its failure in different fields. But in spite of all these critical aspects, one point is still very important, and I uh, conclude this topic with that point, that United Nations is still a largest international organization of the world with the membership of 193 member states playing their role in different political, economic, social levels to promote the integrity, to promote peace and security, to promote different developmental policies and programs among the states of the world. And United Nations is still providing the universal forum throughout global level, and the world community can hope to secure peace, justice and progress with the participation and cooperation of all nations. So commitment of member states is very necessary, because a successful United Nations organization or successful any successful international organization always remain a reflection of successfulness of the role of participating states. The United Nations is still promoting cooperation among member states. It is a forum and a growing organization to improve world order, in which different political systems with conflicting concerns are and interest can coexist with the minimum of friction and dangerous confrontations. Overall, United Nations future can be traced under major suggested proposals. Number one, the United Nations should give equal treatment to all the member states, irrespective of their size, strength, and the standard of living enjoyed by their people. Next, role of major power, efficient and neutral and effective role of superpowers is very necessary, and it is also necessary to stop hegemonic role of different major powers in the functioning of the United Nations. Next, the General Assembly should be strengthened enough to ensure implementation on its decisions. Last point, which is very important regarding the future of the United Nations, veto system should be abolished, and the number of members of Security Council should be increased to end the monopoly of major powers through a balanced and continent wise representation. So overall, international future of international organization or future of United Nations can be traced in the light of history of this organization. And our final findings are that although United Nations is not very successful to promote peace and security all over the world, but it remained successful to stop a third major world war. And United Nations, in the light of future of the United Nations, I like explain here that United Nations Economic and Social Council and United Nations 15 specialized agencies such as WHO, ILO, Food and Agriculture Organization, and so many other organizations are playing very important role all over the world to promote economic, social and welfare activities, and also in the development of in this field. United Nations future is certainly brighten if member states play their important role to fulfill their basic obligations according to the Charter of the United Nations, or according to the real spirit of the Charter of the United Nations. So that is the end of our today's discussion. Allah Hafiz.